back to Catholic Conversations. As always, I'm your host, Joelle Zarnowski, and this week I'm super excited to welcome Kateri Lickona to the podcast. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So Kateri, some of our listeners might be familiar with Kateri because she used to work in our youth and young adult office and did a ton of work for them. She's spoken at some diocesan events, but now she wears like 8 hats here at the diocese, works for a bunch of different offices as an administrative assistant. So super busy, but you started working in the youth and young adult office as a very young adult in your early 20s. And so, you've been with the diocese now for how long?
8 years, a little over.
8 years, yeah, which is a long time. Probably doesn't seem like it. It probably seems like it was very quick in some ways, but in other ways you're like, yeah, 8 years. Like, it's a lifetime almost.
No, it seems like a long time.
Oh, good.
I was like, it's so funny when you start a job in your early 20s, you're like, I'll be here for like a year, like maybe 2. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, no, I'm still here. So,
yeah.
Which is wonderful. But no, it definitely feels like it's been like my whole young adult life. So, yeah.
Yeah. And so what was that like for you, like kind of coming into adulthood while also working for the church and being a practicing Catholic?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So in the beginning, I feel like it definitely was a little bit lonely. If I'm being honest, just because I was so enamored and like on fire to like serve the church when I was like a teenager and then early young adulthood. And I just didn't have a lot of peers that were like interested in the same way that I was.
Yeah.
So when I started working at the diocese, it was just very like, it was just kind of like I didn't have a lot of peers that were in similar fields even, and didn't have a lot of places to go to discuss and to like, share professional experiences at the time, especially since I really got like dropped right in at the diocesan level. So that was like really intense. I always like, I used to love The Wizard of Oz when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. And it really is a little bit like I was Dorothy, and like I walk in and I'm like pulling back the curtain, and behind the curtain is like a man, right? And it's just like a bunch of people. So here in the diocese, it's just like a bunch of people, but it's a different view of the church. It's like so different than what you see at your parish level. So also having so many friends that were young adult Catholics and just not being able to really like see the church in the same way from their perspective. So that was really intense. Like it took some getting used to, because I was just like, wow, okay, this is really, you really see the church from like a bird's eye view. Yeah. And that's amazing and it's beautiful, but it's very intense.
Yeah. So my experience like coming to the diocese was a little different because I worked in a parish beforehand.
Right. Yeah.
So I had that experience, like working at my church on the weekends was like my first job when I was 15 years old. Mm-hmm. So I had that like little bit of experience, and then I went back to the parishes 10 years ago, and then I worked at the parish for like 5 years before I came to the diocese. So it was a little bit of a different experience for me because I wasn't going straight to the diocese and like diving right in, So, but like it is very different. So like working for a parish and then working for the diocese, and then like when I know for me, like when I started working for the diocese, like there were so many things that surprised me as a cradle Catholic that I was like, wait, that's why we do this? Yeah. Or, oh, that's how this all happens. Like, it's not magic. These things don't just happen on their own. Like, no, there's a lot of work that goes into so much of our church. So for you, what were some of those things that like surprised you, or I don't know, just made you see things differently?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will say I started volunteering at my parish when I was like 15 as well. Yeah. So, and my dad was actually the director of religious education, what they called that at the time, at my parish when I was in high school. So I like volunteered teaching in the classrooms, and I actually would help him like stuff envelopes and everything. So we were really involved in the parish, and that was an experience that I felt like I was so grateful for having come to work at the diocese, because even though I was a kid and you're basically seeing it from the perspective of like a teenager, you're not really seeing it from the perspective of an adult. I still was so grateful that I was able to like be active in the parish, because like you said, it's so important to understand like the parish level of things. Yeah. So it's funny, what surprises me, one thing that like continues to surprise me constantly is kind of, and you know this, you're like in communications, is communication is really difficult. Yes. I was like, wow, it's incredible how much misunderstanding there is, how easily we objectify each other in the church, and how we have to be constantly reminded to like see each other and encourage others to see each other, you know, as children of God, as fellow human beings, all on the journey towards heaven. And so just making sure that like our communication is timely and clear is always a challenge, as I know you know. And encouraging people to, you know, state what they need from us, or state from, you know, what they need from the church. And listening is, you know, a challenge. Pope Francis really taught us that. So that was definitely, this is always surprising. I'm always surprised at how intense. And I think that's a huge part of it, is that we live in the time we live in, and communication is so important. And we tend to like, you know, we're behind our devices. We tend to not like always remember that we're, you know, all human beings, and all, you know, fallible, and all trying to do our best. Yeah. Hopefully. We hope everyone's trying to do their best.
Yes, exactly. Yes, that is the hope. Yeah. That is the hope. And I think too, like, things change so rapidly. So like we went through the whole process of like Pope Francis passed away, and then we went into that time period of mourning, and then it was immediately into the conclave and the election of the Pope, and it just all moves so quickly. And you want to make sure that you're staying on top of communicating things, and even not things as big as, you know, a change in leadership of the church, but there are other things that happen like very rapidly, like when we have priest reassignments, like we just had all of our pastoral assignments for the spring announced. And so trying to stay on top of those things can be very very challenging. And
especially since even that is new in a certain respect, the modern world moves really fast. You know, and you have like Pope Leo being so wonderful about, you know, being really conscientious about picking his name, you know, to really be in the modern time. And, you know, he talks about AI and technology and everything. So the modern world is so fast paced, and the church has to keep up now. And that is also a little hard for us. We're a really old institution. We're really like not, we're kind of like getting the hang of moving really fast and changing and adapting and learning new things. And so that's also, like I said, it's just something that's also new. Mediums of communication are new, and like the rapid pace of the world is still in the scheme of the church's history, a new thing.
So. Well, because like pastoral assignments back before the internet, you know, things were getting announced at Mass, and then, you know, that was going out maybe in the paper and a letter or something. But now it's like we have to have our stuff ready to go like right after the first Mass is on Saturday, because people are going to start texting each other, or it's going to be on social media. So
absolutely.
It's interesting. So you and I have talked a lot about, you know, so with technology and everything, and like the way that Catholicism is portrayed in like movies, TV, and like we've seen lately kind of a rise, I think, in engagement with like celebrities in the Catholic faith, because of like things like Hollow, and you've got Mark Wahlberg is really involved in that, and he's always been Catholic, maybe not practicing, but he's definitely practicing Catholic now, and very devout in his faith. And, you know, everybody goes through challenges, but so like things like Hollow, you have him and Jonathan Rumi, who is on The Chosen. So now we have The Chosen is out there, which is such a wonderful way, I think, for people to see the gospel like lived out in front of you. And for people that find it difficult to read scripture, I know sometimes for me, I always have struggled like kind of making sense of it, because sometimes it can be really, really wordy, and you're like, okay, I get the gist, but like make it simpler for me, please. And that is something that I really love about The Chosen, is that you can like, it does simplify it, and you can see it and like understand it better. And I know like we talked recently about the Conclave movie, which I had said was really weird seeing Voldemort playing a cardinal. That was very awkward. And of course, like that film was not completely true to what actually happens with the conclave, but this depiction of like Catholicism and pop culture as a young adult, I know sometimes I find it very frustrating, like even when I'm watching TV and I see something portrayed about the Catholic faith and I'm like, that's not accurate. Or sometimes I'll see something and be like, oh, finally somebody gets it. Like, yes, that is accurate. How do you feel about the way that, you know, Catholicism is sometimes portrayed in pop culture as a young adult?
Yeah. So Wow. So there's two things, I think. There's like movies and media, and then there's internet engagement with faith content. So you mentioned Hallow, and as far as movies go, it's a mixed bag, right? But I tend to love it. I did go see Conclave, and I think it's funny. You say, well, it's not how it was, but it's kind of funny. We don't know what it's really like. We just went through this. It's so secretive. You don't really know.
Right.
So there's this imagination that's there where it's like, what is it like in the inside? But yeah, it's not really. I would say what's not true to the faith is that I think it's so interesting. You have the movie Conclave, and there's a point in it where somebody makes the candidate that's eventually chosen makes this big monologue, stands up among the other cardinals, makes this monologue about just the state of the church, and everybody's just like, and I always thought that was just so interesting because as a practicing Catholic, and who is someone who's really like, I loved Pope Francis, I love like the popes, and I love their writings, and like, man, I mean the depth that's portrayed in that monologue doesn't even touch what you hear from John Paul II, Benedict, Francis. So I just think it's so interesting that you're like, well, yeah, it's not that revelatory what he says. So you see that there's not a total accurate understanding of the depth of our faith. But The Chosen is a great example of like a theatrical show that is really brings characters alive for people, and that is like really transformed the lives of people that I know, that just really connects them, reminds them that these people are human. That like, that's always what I look for in these movies and TV shows. You mentioned Mark Wahlberg, and I loved Father Stu. I saw that. I actually thought that was a great. I still
have to watch it. Yeah. It's on my list.
I thought that was a great representation of conversion, and that's one thing that like I also look for is this authentic to the human experience, how God interacts with the human person, what it looks like when you encounter Christ, what it looks like when you have a real encounter with God's grace, and he enters your life. So my personal favorite for that reason is Brideshead Revisited, the old version with Jeremy Irons. It's like, I think it's 6 parts or whatever. I've watched it so many times. I love it. It's based on the novel by Evelyn Waugh. I think I'm saying that right. Someone will correct me in the chat. Okay. But and I love that just because it shows that the drama of the Christian life, conversion, and humanity of people, what we go through on a day-to-day basis. Then you have sort of internet personalities, as I call them. So some great ones. We all know like Father Mike Schmidt. And
I just started Bible in a year, and it has been like, oh my gosh, so great. Like he's so charismatic. So yes, great example. I feel like if people don't know who he is, they need to go check him out because he's got some great stuff.
I think he's known among young people. I feel like I have met, I don't know if my grandparents know who Father Mike is. No, they must. I'm sure they donate to his like his campus ministry or something. But but still, so there's that, which can be a mixed bag for sure. One of the things that it does concern me is, a lot of that stuff we consume through the algorithm, right? Mm-hmm. And the algorithm brings us to a mixed bag of content. And a lot of the stuff that even is coming, into your feed, and it's even from maybe people that identify as Catholic and stuff, it may not have a true representation of what the church teaches in it. Right. I'm always wary. There is a difference between, what the church teaches and, catechesis and theology. So you have, theology as a disciplined like explanation of revelation, and it can be varied. It has a methodology and everything. But then you have catechesis, which is really a communication of what the church believes. Right. So you want to go to the source as often as possible when you have questions. Don't just go to those, talking heads, because, it may or may not be really. It's correct is not maybe the word I want to use, but it may not be really true to what the church desires to communicate about its teachings. So, Bible in a year is great. The Catechism of the Catholic Church, I always say, read it cover to cover. Or now we have, Father Mike's Catechism. Yeah, Catechism in a year. So, just so you really have a good understanding of what the church teaches, but also it forms your worldview. And then when you encounter these different personalities or these different things, it really can help you weed out what might not be something you should really take on as your worldview or your belief. Right. Yeah.
And there are like definitely reputable sources that you can go to. Like
for sure.
Hollow is a good one for like prayer life for sure. But then you also have Ascension Press. They have tons of podcasts, like not just Father Mike Schmitz, like they have other stuff too. They have a lot of really great books. Ave Maria Press is another one that has a lot of really great resources. Bishop Barron's Word on Fire, he has a ton of great stuff. Some parishes might still be offering Formed, which is a platform where you can go watch videos and find a bunch of different programs to help you understand things in the Catholic faith more. So there's a lot of really great reputable sources out there, but you're right. Like when you're on social media, that algorithm, not always trustworthy. So you got to like really be sure that you're, you know, double checking things and going to those reputable sources to back up the things that you're hearing for sure. What I'm trying to think how I want to word this question. So finding that balance of like being true to your faith, but then still like having to deal with everything in like the secular world. Like sometimes it can be really frustrating as a Catholic to see the way that Catholics are portrayed in like the media in general. Like how do you grapple with that? I know for me, a lot of times I have to just kind of like block it out, but that's not always an option. So
yeah, no, I mean, blocking it out can be important. It depends on your state of life, right? You know, you need to know what's good for your mental health or just what you can handle in your life in general. If you're a mother, let's say with a bunch of kids, you have a focus or you have, you know, whatever, you have to work in communications. You have to consume a lot of stuff. That's like a huge challenge, right? So it's like got to be like a spiritual discipline for you to really learn how to navigate that. So, you know, what's interesting, something that has been a huge experience that I've had, or a repeated experience that I've had being a young person working for the church. Because like you said, I started working in the church when I was like very young. And is that I encounter a lot of people, I know we've talked about this before, but that are our age who have had some experience with Catholicism. Maybe they were raised Catholic or they've had some experience with another denomination, you know, another Christian denomination or another religion. And a lot of times those experiences are not good for them. So I always take like harsh messages about Catholicism in the culture really from a place of, you know, I don't really know what that person experienced as maybe like a Catholic in their young years or and they're probably speaking from that experience in some way.
Right.
And that's probably not the best, but it is their life. It is what's happened to them. I really learned this from Pope Francis. I really learned that, you know, listening is not agreeing. So we can have a certain openness to really look at the perspective of people maybe that are critical of the church or that are, you know, not portraying Catholicism in the best light and just try to see what's behind that. And, you know, you can't always do that. Like you said, sometimes you just need to just tune it out, you know, not listen. But I've had so many experiences where I say, you know, I work for the church and then somebody wants to share an experience that they've had with the church. A lot of times it's young people that maybe they were confirmed and then they stopped practicing.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's good experiences, but sometimes it's not. So I think that like just trying to be, I guess it's a perspective of someone that works for the church, always trying to be understanding when I encounter those like critical messages and also like we talked about earlier, seeing their humanity and knowing that they're also a child of God and that even like, you know, directors, film producers and stuff like that, they have an experience of religion in some way in their life and they're probably speaking from their experience.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So before we wrap up, what advice would you offer to young adults? Like you talked a lot about like listening to other people, listening to their experience, but what advice would you offer to people who really are trying to stay rooted in their faith, but they're coming up against these challenges like with social media is going to keep changing and it's going to just become more and more prevalent in our lives as we move forward. Like it's so much more prevalent now than it was even like 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. So what advice would you have for young adults who are trying to navigate that?
Yeah. Well, you know, here at the diocese, we always say the know, live, and share about the faith. So we talked about the catechism, knowing the faith, but so forming that worldview, but just staying connected to the church as much as you can. So a great example is, you know, following the precepts of the church. You know, they're on our website underneath the, you know, how to live your faith section. So going to mass, regardless, go to church every Sunday. That's the thing I always say. Mm-hmm. And, we are young adults. We know we encounter challenges in our life. We encounter difficulties. Just go to the church. Maybe you don't fully participate, but go and be there with the Lord. Yeah. So going to mass, going to confession, the church asks us to go to confession once a year. It's not, going to confession can be difficult, but once a year, maybe we can handle it. Yeah. So, staying connected to the church is the biggest thing. Surrounding yourself, of course, with people that can accompany you, whether that's friends. And sometimes I think as young people, we focus a lot on, we'll be like, well, you need to have friends that support you. But they always talk about those friends being like your age. Right. They don't have to be your age. No. You and I know we work in the chancery, and we have mentors that are a variety of ages that support us in our faith. So, making friends with people that can support you, being accompanied, that will help you with the living part. And share in little ways. It doesn't have to be big, but sharing also reaffirms, of course, our own faith. Yeah. So keep it simple. Learn as much as you can. Read the catechism, follow the precepts of the church, connect yourself with people that also are living the faith, that might have the wisdom of age to guide you. Yeah. So that's my advice. Yeah.
No, I love, that's like one of my favorite things about working here is that we have people from so many different generations, and I don't even think about it when we're all working together. They're my colleagues, they're my mentors, they're my friends, and that's so true. To have people who, it doesn't matter if they're your same age or they're older or they're younger, if they feel the same as you do and they can walk with you, then that's all that really matters.
100%.
So, yeah. Well, thank you again for coming on today. I really appreciate you sharing your experiences. Yeah. And thanks to our listeners. We will see you next week.